So I've had the opportunity to kind of approach the learning of filmmaking through YouTube. And it's interesting because when I was at the actor studio and the two teachers that were there at the time now have passed away. The one teacher that was on the other side, I think, was Kemp, and that was the one that Bradley Cooper was part of. Then there was Bob Lavelle, and he's also passed away. I think he was more of kind of I don't really know. I didn't have Kemp as an acting teacher at the time, and all the film study that I did at that very time was on my own at Bulp's library, which was the NYU library. It was a big library, has an elevator, it's huge. You could spend like all day there. Um, but uh, the reason I'm making this post is because I'm kind of bringing the main attention of the importance of YouTube. And I don't think at the time that YouTube was available. I was there and I was at the Actor Studio Drama School, and it was at the New School Social Research, which is still there. I believe Sean Baker had emphasized in editing there coming out of NYU Film School. Bradley was there. I only heard about him, so I didn't get to meet him. I heard that he talked to De Niro, and then he landed some work, and we were all jealous. And the teachers would sometimes talk about him, and I would. I remember hearing a movement teacher talking about him when he did the Elephant Man, and I was thinking about doing the Elephant Man. Also, I was thinking about doing the Swan too, which is Egloff's Swan, and I became very very jealous because she kind of swooned, her eyes kind of rolled, and it was like she was talking about, Brad Pitt or James Dean or something like that. And I was like, who could this guy possibly be? Because he was not a star at this time. And it was someone they talked about. And they didn't talk about really anybody, but the star system was still in place, meaning there was still Hollywood stars, and there still are today. But they talked to him. I mean, they talked of him, I guess, of him as if he was this great thing, and he hadn't been in anything but maybe like Alias or something like that. But we didn't have YouTube at that time, but we still had word of mouth. Um, we had, of course, there was cable, there was cinema, there was still movie houses, there was still plays, like, there was off Broadway, there was Broadway, and then of course there was there was movies, and he hadn't reached that level yet. But we didn't really sit around and talk about YouTube or launching a project. But there was talk of doing films or doing stories on your own, possibly, and the rumor was to put them online. Um, to do your own thing and launch that online and do an online movie. Bob actually mentioned it one time, and Bob wasn't a huge fan of Hollywood. I think he was nominated for a Tony and was in a really good Broadway version, or off Broadway. I think it was a Broadway version of on Golden Pond. Uh, and like James Lipton would come in and sit down, and we would be doing like emotional recall stuff, and we all kind of, in a way, laughed at Lipton, and at times a lot of the students, they liked him, but we all kind of made fun of him, and I think that was coming out of like Will Ferrell and stuff like that, making fun of him on Saturday Night Live, because Saturday Night Live was a big deal. But I remember Bob saying something about don't go home and make your own movie and put it online. Don't be one of those people. And I was trying to think at the time. I was like, what the hell is he talking about? And that's exactly what I did. And I think at that point that we had a meeting, some of the actors. It kind of reminded me of some films that have come out about acting and actors and the community of actors. And I think, man, I cannot think of the film, but it had come out. It was like a Coen Brothers film or something, where there was like this actors union, and there were a group of actors in like the 50s or something, and they're all poor and hungry, and they may have had a family, and I'll have to think of the actual movie, but it's some Hollywood film, and Rock the Cradle or something like that. I don't remember the title, but we were having this meeting, and I felt like, man, this is just like that movie. Here's a bunch of non-star actors in this room, and this is, maybe Bradley, I think, was probably maybe doing like, he may have like landed a little thing on Sex and the City. I mean, he could have been in that room at that time, but he had already graduated, and they were kind of talking about him. I mean, no one knew at that time that he was going to be an iconic star. They probably thought maybe, it's a possibility. But I remember them all talking, and then I thought to myself, I think there's something else that we can depend on rather than just going to LA and becoming their slave, or going into the Hollywood system and becoming like a slave to like these studio executives, or to these people that have all this money, like these huge banks, and you better do it this way. And that was in the air. And we were all kind of sitting around talking as a group. And I think I remember hearing someone saying something about how Lipton really cared about the Bravo show. And there were some writers in the room, and there was these other actors that were probably maybe had this really small role in like an off Broadway show, or they were doing a scene in a coffee shop. I think I remember talking to a few of the actors, and they're like, we're going to do this scene at a freaking coffee shop, while people were drinking coffee. We're going to go up there and do this like little scene thing. And we were doing like these little shows, like in a classroom. Like a little tiny stage. It wasn't like we were at the studio doing these full-on plays for Broadway, because really nobody knew we were even there or existed. And when Bob Lavelle, I believe that's how you pronounce his name, when he said, don't go home and be this actor that puts your stuff, online, like in this little independent film. I think in a way he wanted us to, charge Hollywood, by the horns, just full on go right to Hollywood door, knock on the door, and we're from the actor studio, let us be in this movie, and that would have never happened. We would have been thrown out. You just don't walk in and demand things. I mean, they don't care. And then I remember walking around, and you would get like someone would hand you this thing for, you want to be a model, and you'd go to this it was like it wasn't a cattle call, but it was like a group of people, and this guy would come in. This one guy came on crutches, and he talked to the class, and you need $3,000, and then they're going to parade you down this runway, and it'd be like they'd be interviewing these other actors that had done it, and you just smell the gimmicks, the sales pitch of everything. And like, I'm going to give this person $3,000, and I'm going to take my chance and walk across this runway, and then they're going to eventually probably send me out on a commercial, and that I'm not even going to be behind the creative aspect of that commercial, and I'm just going to buy my way into the system and go the wrong route with it, and all of a sudden I'm doing other people's work, and I'm a mouthpiece for something that I may not agree with, and that scared me. So in a way, I was kind of like, F you, I'm not gonna hang around here for very much longer. I think it was after a year. There were some other actors that felt the same, and of course 9/11 happened. It gave us even more reason to get out of town. But there's some truth about what Bob was saying. Don't be one of those actors that go off and make a little film on your own online. But I actually was the complete opposite. I'm like, go be one of those actors that go off and make your own film online. And now there's, of course, YouTube, which is a big deal, because you can make a film in 48 hours and send it out on YouTube and launch it if you have the right software and digital. So to follow this post up about YouTube, and I know it's real scattered, I'm talking about the Actor Studio, and I'm kind of giving you this kind of James Joyce description of what I was going through. And you know, it may be a little hard to put A and B and C together, but the idea is that we do have a platform that you can learn from, and that you can even create and in any time, accessible at your fingers right now, launch your own film uh, without anybody's permission and any uh, funding at all. You know, there's an actor that was coming out of Hollywood. I think he was in Independence Day. I think he went to Austin for a while. He's an animal rights guy, and he does a film for like $20. You know, I'm not saying that he's the model filmmaker, but he's been discovered on Sundance, and he's done these weird films that are recognized as kind of genius material. But he does it with a video camera and he launches it somewhere. But what I mean about YouTube is that it's immediate. It's breaking the barriers of the studio system, which I think it needs to be done. And I think in 50 years it's dramatically going to change, because you're going to have more studios popping up in small town rural areas of like maybe Indiana or some small little areas of Texas, or small little unknown towns in the middle of nowhere, and they're actually a real studio that can revolutionize the script or possibly revolutionize a documentary, and do it all digitally and immediately. So it's becoming accessible right to your fingers, and YouTube is powerful. And I think that's one thing that probably made Bob mad, even though he's passed away and rest in peace, because he was a great teacher. And he was a great teacher because he did focus on language. He focused on the novel. He focused on reading. He focused on always reading plays and reading material, and then working in the theater and stuff like that. But I think what made him mad was that we could do that. And he couldn't really, because he was already on Broadway and already involved with the Tony, and already maybe a possibility that he could maybe land a film and become iconic. I remember he mentioned Johnny Depp as big bad Johnny Depp, you know. So there was a sense of jealousy and envy that we had towards Hollywood because we couldn't control that system at that time, just being like a community theater actor, or being a small little off-Broadway actor, or just being a student, an MFA student, and reading, you know, Stella Adler or whatever it is, and just, you know, almost like a philosopher. And you had no real idea what your future was. So I think he was probably extremely jealous of us. But to tell the students, you know, don't go off and, you know, put your film on, don't fund your own film, and you know, I think that's a dangerous thing to tell an actor. So I completely 100% disagreed. And I eventually did leave on my own. Because I think you know, I had enough of, I think I understood it enough. Because when I got to the studio and I was sitting there listening to everyone speak, I think I had an idea of the terminology. What they were doing is like an experimental workshop kind of area, and I have no problem and completely 100% support people, you know, experimenting. But there's only so much experimentation that you can do until you just burn it out, and finally you say F it, and you have to take matters in your own hands. And some actors will, and then some actors won't, and that's fine. Anyway, so the whole idea of the post is the importance of YouTube for the actor as a mouthpiece, and as the writer, even the novelist, or the script writer, or the playwright. And I want to make 3 final points. What I've heard Coppola, because I'm still learning from YouTube. I think we should always still be learning, and YouTube kind of recirculates these classes online, and it recirculates ideas from other people that really know a lot about filmmaking and storytelling. And it was in, I guess, class today on my YouTube, kind of looking over things, reminding myself, and kind of dumbing down my ego, and trying to go, oh, okay, that's what I need to start to discover with storytelling, or that's what I need to approach, and oh, okay, this is what I'm not doing right. And one thing, before I get into Coppola, the one thing also about Hoffman too is that I heard that Hoffman still goes to these like workshops and almost as if he doesn't even know anything about acting, and he's still kind of learning. And I think Lavelle kind of taught us that aspect, that these ancient monks a long time ago that would paint in the sand, and then they would just erase the sand, and they would start painting again in the sand, like drawing in the sand and then erasing. And then what they created was there for a moment, and then they erased it, and then they started over, and erased it and started over. Well, Coppola was kind of talking about that in an interview, that he had to like kill himself and then reborn this new person, this new identity. So he's killing his old self and then being reborn into this new identity and learning something new. But he said three interesting things. Francis Ford Coppola said three very interesting things about the future of cinema, and I think YouTube is going to be a part of that. One thing is you can buy films on YouTube at any time. You can use it like you would Netflix. And really, to be honest, I find all the good stuff on YouTube through the Centurion collection, or the Criterion collection. Criterion collection. That's being aired just like it would be like on cable. And this is like high quality filmmaking or masterpieces from great filmmakers, throughout the last 100 years. And in the interview that Coppola talked about, he said that the future of cinema would be revolutionized in three different, three different ways, or what it would be is three aspects or three subjects that would be revolutionized in the cinema. The first of them was of course, the script. And he was juxtaposing stuff that James Cameron had done with Avatar and this exciting 3D and all this stuff. And he was saying, no, it's not that direction. It's not going to be a technical revolutionary thing where you're wearing these glasses and you're seeing this 3D kind of thing, which Linklater kind of did with Scanner Darkly and cartoon. And what I mean is like a new skin to the theater in a technical aspect. It wasn't going to be that, really, not in a technical way or in a 3D way, but it was going to be the script. So the script could be revolutionized in different ways. And then he said the second thing, which kind of threw me, was the documentary. So the documentary would be revolutionized, and all of this would be dramatically affected by the third aspect, which was digital, which is what's going on right now. So those were the three things that he focused on. So you had the revolutionize of the script, you had the second thing, which is the documentary, and then you had the fact that we have digital right here, which is quick. You don't have to worry about actually seeing the film. It's done with a computer, which is right here. So you are kind of your studio, and I'm probably going to post this as that you are your studio, or you will be your studio. And the stuff that's going to be in the next 50 years that's going to be amazing is going to be coming out of the creativity and the intellect of the person and not the studio, I think, because for one thing, our phones are becoming dangerously brilliant, and probably to the studio execs, strangely, the comparison of a $60,000 Arri or $60,000 Red camera is not too much different than what they're looking at, like a regular iPhone that you see, being posted on YouTube or something. I think Sean Baker, who also came out of the new school too, made Tangerine with an iPhone, just so that he could, later on make the Florida Project with 35 millimeter. Don't get me wrong, I'm not downing the fact that he's using 35 millimeter, but I think David Lynch probably would, because David Lynch is staying away from film because it's a mess. Film is like cigarettes. It's like, you're dealing with all these ashtrays and all this. With film, you're dealing with all these chemicals and you're dealing with all this toxic, And I feel more on the side of Lynch and the fact that, you have digital there, a way to tell the story. It's like the difference between going to Walmart and finding a cheap pair of jeans you can wear, or going and spending $80 or $120 on a pair of jeans that look almost the same. And then people will sit there and say, no, well, 35 millimeter needs to come back, and there's a big argument, and it's just ridiculous because it's going to fade away. It's gonna cut off, and 35 millimeters is just gonna be in the museums. I promise you. It's just too much to deal with. And you can make a digital camera or even software look exactly like a 35 millimeter production, almost exactly. And I also hear this terminology like, well, the light's going through the actual film, and the camera, or it's organic, like it's like eating an organic apple as opposed to an apple that just was at Walmart. you but I think what Coppola said tonight in this interview, and I wish I could give you the interview. Unfortunately, you're going to have to go through YouTube and find it. Some lady interviewed him, and he talks about the generations of him being in filmmaking for 5 generations, and all this stuff about Marlon Brando and all this great stuff. I think when he goes back and he talks about film, he goes back to the script, because it comes back to the mind of the writer. And even Homer, if you go way back in the time of Greek, he just told his story supposedly, and he wasn't even, he wasn't even, he couldn't even see and to really type it out or write it. And probably they wrote stuff back then, but the idea is that it's coming from the mind of the storyteller, and that's what he's talking about, the script. Now, the second point is a documentary, and I think those two things are like opposing each other, like 69, or yin and yang, the script and the documentary. Because I thought about it at first. I thought, well, why did he mention the documentary? Well, the documentary is more of kind of like the jazz solo artist that's not really dealing much with the actual written word, but they are, but not as much as the script, which is going to lead into narrative. So the documentary is almost like you're just kind of trying to capture anything. And I think he always talks about the story with Marlon Brando, where he snuck in like ninjas and set up the camera, and Marlon starts doing this weird stuff with shoe polish, and he takes it to the executives and gets the film funded for The Godfather. And like that was kind of a documentary in a way, because he just kind of snuck the camera in and just kind of gave him some sausage and didn't say much to him and let him kind of make up something. So the documentary is kind of being made